Okay, do we have Danie here? I see Danie. There she is.
I am here.
Danie is the director of the Biological and Chemical Oceanography Data Management Office, which is also based here at WHOI. And she's going to give us an update because there's talk about a purring engine. Lots going on at BCO-DMO. So, Danie, I invite you to take it away, share your slides, and do your thing.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Can you guys see all that? See that? Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Heather. I know it's a mouthful. So many of you have probably heard of BCO-DMO over that other long, long name. So BCO-DMO it is. And I just want to open with saying that as a community, OCB is one of BCO-DMO's sort of main and primary stakeholders. And like OCB, we are here to support you. And also, fun fact, like OCB, we BCO-DMO as a repository serving NSF's OCE researchers, we started in 2006 as well. So we're on this sort of like very partnered trajectory with OCB, and we're really grateful and fortunate to be part of that sort of bigger OCB community. And so this talk is going to be a little bit about news and updates if you're familiar with BCO-DMO, but it looked like there was a great contingent of early career folks as well. So we'll do a little bit of introducing ourselves as we tend to do every year, but hopefully if you're familiar with us, there'll be some really interesting updates and some, I don't know, some teasers for upcoming things as well. So if you're not familiar with who we are a repository that was created to serve all of NSF's OCE bio and chem programs to help researchers both manage but also share, publish output from their research that includes data, information, and also software and code nowadays. And we work hard to make those data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable or fair. And the results of all that work have really ended in a very rich resource in the data repository and catalog itself. And that's shared publicly back to all of you as a research community, but also to the general public for educational purposes and policy and management and decision making. And so you have all helped create this really amazing research resource that is the BCO-DMO repository. And all of that doesn't happen on its own. It takes a team. Here is the current BCO-DMO team. We've transitioned a lot sort of over the years. This team is made up of full-time and part-time folks who help us out to work with all of you as investigators individually to help share your data, manage your data, and eventually publish that out. The team is made up of members that are either academically trained in oceanography to a master's or PhD level, or they're in the informatics and computer science space. So we really want to reassure you that we have a great handle on helping you share and publish your data out. We provide services across the full gamut of research data lifecycle. So whether you are working on just planning for a proposal and you need to craft sort of your data management plan, how you expect to collect and share that data out, or whether you're in the throes of collecting your data and you need some guidance on how to best represent it or organize it, we can provide guidance on file formats that are unique or specific to a particular subdiscipline and help you manage that data through those decisions. Also how to describe your metadata, and finally help you publish that out to get you your DOI for your publications. So we work on all of that individually, always available for questions and comments. And we just want you to know that we're here. And likewise, it takes even more than just us to be able to do this. I think last year we shared this slide. We're really grateful to these folks who were the first of our strategic planning committee. This was sort of an inaugural committee that we developed during our last funding cycle. We couldn't do our work without the really great feedback and time that these folks gave us during our grant cycle last cycle. They functioned as liaisons between you as a community and us as a repository to really help hone some of our strategy development and test drive some of our features and give a lot of feedback. So we're very grateful to these folks, and we've sort of transitioned with getting renewed last year, which was another great feat. So we're really appreciative for them and our new funding cycle as well, where we'll be sort of taking the lessons learned from working with our strategic planning committee and convening a new research data advisory board. This will have a little more structure than we had on our last committee. We anticipate still a really light lift of just helping us to develop the strategies for how BCO-DMO runs its operations and develops new features and services for you as a community. And so at this time, we're now looking to reconvene and searching for new members. So just like OCB, if you are data savvy and you're really interested in maybe taking a peek behind the curtain and see how research data is both managed and published out, or if you are working with really challenging data types that you and your community would like to get a better handle on standards or best practices for, or whether you're using data in education and curriculum development, or if you just have ideas that you'd love to share with us, we would absolutely love to hear from you and really encourage you to reach out to us if you'd like to sit and serve as one of these advisory board members. Again, we said we hope that we're anticipating still a light lift, and we're kind of cooking up some incentivization to make it worth your time. We're very appreciative of everybody's time, and we realize also that taking time out of your busy schedule does come at a cost. So nominally, we hope to just get this group together maybe quarterly, but also one of those would be in person, and we would love to sort of support that meeting happening at a co-located meeting of interest like Ocean Sciences, or the next time OCB gets together in person. And we really look forward to developing another great team to help us and help advise us in our decision-making processes. So I encourage you to reach out to us if you're interested in all things oceanographic data. So some big updates that we had in previous years of OCB in person. You all were so helpful in determining strategies and different features for our new website. Well, we did launch that finally this year, so thank you all for your patience. And it was a rather soft launch. We did advertise it in the OCB newsletter, so hopefully you got to see that there. But if not, we just encourage you to go kick the tires on this. We worked really hard on it, and you provided a lot of great input on it. And I encourage you to look at, go search and try and find your data sets. And when you land on your data set page, just take a look around and feel free to give us your feedback. We're really welcoming of that. The old BCO-DMO website has been decommissioned. So hopefully if you have one of those legacy links, it will redirect you here. But as you kind of pan around and search for data or explore your own data sets, just give us a shout out and let us know how things look. And more importantly, if you find something that just doesn't seem like it's working properly or something erroneous, please reach out to us. Otherwise, we hope you enjoy it, and we hope it's a lot more easy to navigate and effective and efficient. So thanks for your patience there. Another coming feature release is related to our submission system. So if you've submitted data to us since we've launched our submission tool, you'll know that there is a left-hand nav bar that helps you navigate the different sections of metadata that we require when you submit your data to us. And if you've done that in the last couple weeks, maybe, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks, you may have noticed this additional little nav section on that left-hand side called a checklist. And this, along with some of the other improvements that we're hoping to launch this year or later during this grant cycle, are all designed to help shorten the time to getting your data published. This particular feature is helping improve guidance that we provide during submission and also communications. So this checklist that you'll see, if we need more information or confirmation from you during your data submission, your data manager will create one of these checklists right in your submission entry. And it'll have all the details that normally get included in an email banter back and forth with us. And we're hoping to kind of reduce that volley and provide the information that we're looking for or the request for that information directly in your submission. And so you'll click on that. You can click on that little checklist. It has a number of topic items that you can go read the details on. And then there's a link that takes you right to where you need to be to either provide clarity or more information there. And then once you resubmit your submission, your data manager can go check those off, and you can see the status of all of that every time you visit. So hopefully we're trying to improve how we deliver the guidance and maybe shorten the communication lines there. So again, feedback at BCO-DMO.org. As you're using this and you're making your submissions in the coming weeks and months, feel free to give us feedback on how it's going. We really appreciate it. And then coming hopefully by the end of this summer, we're almost ready to launch this as well, is our data cart. And this is a feature that OCBers and others have asked for quite a while now, and it's the ability to select and download multiple data sets from one session of visiting the repository. And there'll be a number of ways to do this, and you can see I've highlighted here ways in the search window to be able to automatically add data sets of interest to a cart, or select and unselect many at a time and then hit all of them into the cart. You can see a little cart icon in the upper right that tells you how many you've added. And so you can do this from the search interface, but you can also do this on individual data set pages. And as you add data sets to your data cart, you'll see that number tick up. And no matter what you add to the data cart, you will always get the metadata bundled together. So you'll never end up with like a whole bunch of data sets and not having any context for them. But then when you're all set, you can click your data cart and it takes you to a checkout screen where you can make a final decision about selecting and deselecting your desired data sets before you hit checkout. And this is a feature that everybody's been asking for a while. We had to get through our last grant cycle where we revamped the whole back end of the repository to be able to provide this for you. So we're really excited. And again, we'll probably announce this in an OCB newsletter, so keep your eyes peeled for that. It's called a data cart right now, and it looks like a shopping cart, but one thing we want to emphasize is that all of the data at BCO-DMO are always free and accessible. So we may come up with another moniker for cart because we don't want to imply that you have to pay for anything. But stay tuned for that one. We're really excited to announce that one. And then I want to take a moment to talk about BCO-DMO as a collaborator. One of the most recent collaborations we were involved in, you may have seen, it was in OCB's most recent May newsletter, and it was regarding the Marine Ecological Time Series RCN. And this is just a snippet from the newsletter article, and I encourage you to go read about that. This was a great collaboration between data scientists, data infrastructure people, and researchers like all of you. And here we provided some leadership support, but also some infrastructure and that sort of informatics expertise to really help the time series folks start to coordinate the data management activities between sharing standards and adhering to or establishing some protocols, but also some infrastructure that will allow those data sets to be elevated into a much more global arena and increase their discovery and utility and quote unquote fairness, their reuse and discoverability. So we were really enthusiastic to collaborate here with OCB folks and Heather and also the Hot Time Series folks, Angel White. It was a really rewarding experience, and I think we brought a lot to the table. And BCO-DMO has also collaborated with other research groups in the past as well, the proteomics group, to help provide some infrastructure expertise and some data management for the ocean protein portal development. And we also provided some data management education and curriculum development to the High Dive for Oceanography workshop that was held at BIOS a few years ago, back in, I think, 2022. So I encourage you, if your projects have these thorny data issues or problems, or maybe some really intense data goals, to consider data infrastructure as a collaborator, because we're always willing to help out the community in that capacity. So looking forward to future collaboration opportunities there. And then lastly, although it's so sad that we are not in person, because I think that's really where we all just do our best work. BCO-DMO usually holds a data help desk where we all make ourselves available to answer just any types of questions you all may have regarding your data, whether it's planning for it and data management planning, whether it's talking about NSF policies or embargo, or you just have really challenging questions, or maybe you're submitting your data right now and have very specific questions about your own submissions. We're always here. And even if we're not in person this year, we're always accessible virtually too. That's the greatest thing about being in the data space. You can pick up a phone, you can write us an email. We're happy to jump on Zooms. The entire team is available during this week. So when you're at the OCB meeting and you're in the thick of thinking about your project data and your related carbon and biogeochemical data sets, feel free to give us a call or reach out to us. We'd love to hear and talk data. So that's all I have. And again, I'm really grateful to be part of this sort of bigger OCB family and community. So thanks very much for your time. We really look forward to everybody having a great OCB meeting this week. So thanks so much. Thanks, Heather. Thanks, May and Mary.
Thank you, Danie. Oh, there's a combined question of BGC Argo and BCO-DMO here. I'm gonna let you answer that first before we dive into Ken talking a little bit more about BGC Argo and GO-BGC.
Oh, that's great. Actually, no connection yet, but I know Ken's about to launch, so
And I'm not seeing the question, but I don't know. So I will say something about data accessibility, but I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, we're not partnering at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is the upshot, but happy to listen.
Great. And Danie, there's one from Zachary Gold in the chat. I'm going to let you answer that in the chat and let Ken get moving on his presentation now.
Okay, so thanks. Sorry, we're not all together. I'm going to give an update on the GO-BGC and SOCOM work that's been done since the last update a year ago. This map shows the current status of both the SOCOM and the GO-BGC arrays. SOCOM in green, GO-BGC in red. There are about 430 multi-sensor floats from these two programs operating today. Just to remind you, a profiling float cycles between 2 kilometers depth in the surface. We run them every 10 days. And if you do that, these floats have a lifetime, a mean lifetime around 5 years. So the dots in the float are out there for quite some time. I want to make the point that I'm just going to talk about the U.S. effort today, but this is part of an international effort, Biogeochemical Argo. You can read biogeochemicalargo.org. There are international, together with the U.S. effort and internationally, 560 floats. The U.S. floats, GO-BGC and SOCOM are here in yellow, and international and other efforts are in blue. I have to thank NSF. This is awesome that they support this work. It is really great. I also want to make the point that this is a great private foundation and public effort. The work at Mabari is supported by the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, and it's great because they can support long-term development projects that are just really hard to sustain through NSF. Really, really great. I also want to thank OCB. This all started back in 2009, OCB scoping workshop, observing biogeochemical cycles at global scales. This was the network in 2009, the network today. We're doing it. Thank you, OCB. And last thank you. It's not just me. It is a really great team, an outstanding team. This is just the executive team for GO-BGC, but it takes a village to do this. I mean, it really is a great group of scientists and engineers and technicians and so on. So what's the update? Since the last Rude Nicholson did an update a year ago, we've deployed 124 GO-BGC and SOCOM floats. The new floats for GO-BGC are here with a black dot, red outline black dot, and the new SOCOM floats are the white dots down here. 124 of them. We are putting a float in every 3 days, and that is a lot of work, I gotta say. All of these floats have oxygen, nitrate, pH, biooptics, chlorophyll fluorescence, backscatter on them. We have 220 more of these floats to deploy, funded by the GO-BGC project in the next 18 months, and then we're done. And I'll talk about that at the end. We've been continually, striving to improve the performance of the sensors that we deploy. We have new oxygen sensors. They're faster, less lag. We're deploying more floats with radiometers on them, downwelling lights. We have improved the mechanics of the pH sensor to reduce failures in the field, and we're deploying an improved fluorometer, which has 2 chlorophyll wavelengths on it, the FL-BB-FL, just to improve chlorophyll detection. As well, we're exploring new applications of sensor data. We now can use the nitrate sensor to detect nitrite in ODZs. This is an example. There's a paper in review, Mariana Biff and myself, on this technique. But here's the Eastern Tropical Pacific, the integrated nitrite from 120 to 800 decibars, and then a comparison for the data in the same area with GLODAP over here, nitrite versus salinity. Looks really good. For people that do nitrogen cycling, I'm looking at Carly Buchwald right there in the screen. I think this will be a big advancement. But I will also say that the real power of BGC Argo is global, and to be able to do global things. So here's a plot, oxygen at 300 meters, GLODAP down here. Took them decades to accumulate the data to map oxygen at 300 meters. Floats, we do it in a year. And not only that can we do it in a year, but we can do it basically weekly. Here's a plot, and there are 3 points for this plot. This is oxygen at 300 from May of this year. Okay, so we can do it monthly. We can actually have 10-day cycle times, get down to just about weekly. So the data is available in real time. It is freely available. Anybody can access this data, and it's easy to get. This is WebODV, right? So you can go online, make the plot, download the data, no problem. But if you want to do something a little more powerful, there are a variety of toolboxes, and you can find those on the GO-BGC website. go-bgc.org. There are MATLAB, there are Python, there are R toolboxes, there are videos, there are tutorials, and so on to access this data. The data actually resides not at BCO-DMO. It goes to the Argo Global Data Assembly Center, which ultimately gets archived at NCEI. We also archive all of our data at the UC San Diego Library quarterly or twice yearly with a DOI snapshot. So you can get all the data with a traceable snapshot. One of the key moments in the past year, the GO-BGC, the BGC Argo data is now being assimilated into World Ocean Atlas. They did a nice assessment of any biases between float oxygen and ship data, and this is a histogram. There is a mean offset of minus 1.3 micromoles per kilogram. We're doing oxygen better than 1%, down in about the 0.5% accuracy level. If you want to look at a trend in time, this 1.3 is important, and there are a number of papers, you have to correct for that. But this is, today there's the float data dominate availability. Another nice paper that just came out, Seth Bushinsky et al. They also looked at offsets between float, and in this case, GLODAP, not just all the ship data. They find an offset of minus 1.9 micromoles per kilogram. Again, down in the sort of 1% error. And Seth also looked at the other things we measure, nitrate, the offset's 0.2 pH. There's a minus 6 milli pH, 0.006 pH offset. And you can derive a number of parameters from using pH and estimates of alkalinity. We do that in GO-BGC. We derive a dissolved inorganic carbon. Offset there is 4 micromoles per kilogram. And you can do phenomenal things with data that look like this. Number of papers that have come out in the past year that use this data. And I'm just going to walk through the 100 papers a year being published with this data now, but a couple of highlights. One of the beauties of the data is merging the float data with models. Huge synergy. This is a nice paper by Jacob Weiss et al., Pete Strutton's group in Tasmania, looking at nitrate from floats to derive net community production, dust deposition from models, and finding that 1/3 of Southern Ocean productivity is supported by dust deposition. Another nice paper, again, model showing model and float data synergy. Magdalena Carranza et al., looking at how storms affect the air-sea flux of carbon dioxide, comparing, in this case, comparing what floats see to what models see, because wind stress is always high in the southern hemisphere, higher to the north of a storm. This is a storm-centric coordinates here. The wind stress and the flux of CO2 is higher in the north side of storms than the south side. You see that in the floats. The interesting point is that floats see in storms a 3x higher flux of CO2 in the storm than you see in the model. That's because the models don't mix deep enough. The floats see the storms and train extra CO2 from below the mixed layer, bring it up, and that outgasses in the storms. The model, this in this case, the model CESM is not doing that. So huge opportunity to improve models by looking at floats and model data. Nice paper. Jason Graff here. This is a co-author in this, Fox et al., looking at the synergy between float data and satellite ocean color data. So you can use the float profiles of optical backscatter, convert that to POC, and then look at regional variations in essentially the gradient of POC into the deep sea, merge that with the satellite data and build very high resolution models, estimates of POC in the deep ocean. So integrated POC from the surface to 1,000 meters here, integrated POC from surface to 500 meters, and then the 500 meter to 1,000 meter. And you see there's really interesting differences in POC in the different regimes of the ocean. Very high resolution. Really starts to be able to transform our understanding of ocean carbon transport, the biological carbon pump, and so on. So, the number of papers that are coming out, as I said, there were almost 100 papers in BGC Argo data last year, freely available. Really, not that hard to get, and it's very high quality. The data is quality controlled in real time, and I want to make the point, people ask, how do we know how good it is? We publish an error estimate with every quality controlled data point, so that, and we think those error estimates are good. So look at the quality flags, and look at the error estimates that come along with actual observations. So what's the future of the program? As I said, well, the GO-BGC funding actually ends this November. We're going to end in November with about 140 floats not deployed. We're basically 1 year behind in our operations, which really accumulates from COVID, from industrial delays, and just a whole bunch of things. But we're basically a year behind. We're going to continue deploying those floats through 2026 in an unfunded, no-cost extension. But to support those deployments, we are canceling everything else that is not related to float deployment. So we had advertised a workshop that was going to take place later this summer. We first postponed it. Now we're basically canceling it. Any funds that were going to the workshop are going to have to go to get floats, these last 140 floats, into the water. Travel, you probably won't see us at, various meetings. That money is all going to get floats in the water. And then, the actual GO-BGC, the trajectory has followed the float deployments. The number of floats operating have followed this trajectory. The last 140 floats, last 200 floats will follow this trajectory, and we'll end up with about just under 500 floats operating, and then decays, right? So the batteries from the first set of floats are running out over here after about 6 years, and the floats go away. The SOCOM project was recently refunded, but at a much lower number of float deployments, on the presumption that GO-BGC would take over deployments in the Southern Ocean. So SOCOM arrays also, it's in a planned, well, I won't say planned decline. Its number of floats is declining because we presume that there would be a GO-BGC2 extension funded. There is a proposal that's been submitted to NSF. It's been through review, still under consideration, but given the current uncertainty in Washington, D.C. and projections for NSF budgets, I don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of a thing, but there will be floats in the water, just as they run. As these floats will run for 6, deployed here, will run for 6 more years. And so, how do you help? What can we do? Well, I'd say the first thing is keep writing papers. Use the data. It's great. The early career workshop that is coming later today, I would just make the point that this data is freely available. I told in our breakout room, I told a story Melissa Omond tells. After her postdoc ended, she didn't have funding. She was able to get profiling float data, write 2 beautiful papers, got her a job at University of Rhode Island. So I think this is really an important entry point for early career scientists. If you don't have other support, there is a great resource available to you. Write proposals to use the data. This is an important metric at NSF. If they don't get proposal pressure to use, float data, they go, well, nobody apparently wants it. And then, finally, feel free to ask questions, suggest improvements to us. Glad to listen. This GO-BGC is funded by a facilities grant. It's sort of constraining in what we can do, but we're always glad to hear updates. And this is just the trajectory of papers per year that people have been writing with BGC Argo data. So with that, I'll save a few minutes for any questions there might be.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
I want you all to make a screenshot of this last slide here, because our agencies are listening to us. And if we're writing papers and we're writing proposals and we're using these data, we're much more likely to see these data sets continue. So any questions for Ken? We can probably take 1 or 2 quick ones while we're getting our panelists from our foundations on the line and on camera. And
I see Will Barrelson has his hand up. Good morning, Will.
Go ahead, Will.
Hi, Kenny. The difference between the float CO2 exchange and what the model predicted.
Mhm.
You don't measure CO2 and you don't measure DIC, so
Yeah.
you're doing quite a few, assumptions and calculations that get you from A to D. How, and each one has a lot of uncertainty because there's a lot of uncertainty with your offset, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
Is given all that, are you still good with a real 3x difference in CO2 exchange?
Yeah, so the interesting thing, if there are biases, they tend to be systematic, right? So if you're, so first of all, how do we get it? We measure pH, and you can estimate alkalinity using a variety of neural network type tools. They're the locally interpolated regressions that Brendan Carter or Henry Bittig have published. You can estimate alkalinity for PCO2 within about 5 micromoles, plus minus 5 micromoles for the alkalinity. That has a very small effect on computed PCO2. It's like 1 microatmosphere. The biggest uncertainty is the thermodynamics then of going, my opinion, of going from pH and alkalinity to PCO2. But that uncertainty is systematic. And there are a number of papers saying that there was a systematic bias in the computed PCO2s. But what you're really interested in here is the relative change. What was PCO2 when the storm, before the storm, PCO2 during the storm, PCO2 after the storm? And those in there, the systematic difference kind of comes out in the wash. So I think the answer is that the relative trends of the flux in the storm relative, which is really driven by PCO2, wind speed, which, and then you compute a piston velocity and atmospheric pressure, which turns out to be important. The numbers for the threefold change are robust. You could be concerned about the absolute level of the flux, but the relative change is pretty good.
We have a community update from Mac Saito on BioGeoSCAPES. So Mac, take it away.
All right. Thanks very much. It's great to see everyone here. So as Drew mentioned, I'll be giving a community update on BioGeoSCAPES as an emerging microbial biogeochemistry program. Let me see if I can organize my Zoom here. There it goes. Great, and so I'm representing the BioGeoSCAPES community, which is a very large group of people who are contributing to this program development, and many of those people are here on this call. The OCB has been very centrally involved as a collaborator, and I also want to acknowledge the various people on the committees and from the writing chapters and the workshop participants on the implementation committee as well. Let's see if I can forward my slide. There it goes. So what is BioGeoSCAPES? It's a global scale research program, and the aim is to launch it later this decade to improve our understanding of microbial biogeochemistry of the oceans. And it will involve multiple scales of study from regional processes to ocean basin scale and include transects, process studies, time series, and laboratory studies. One of the core concepts is really to combine interdisciplinary and bioanalytical capabilities to provide a comprehensive understanding of biogeochemical dynamics and integration with computational biology and ocean biogeochemical modeling. And to do that, we really want to be underpinned by intercalibration efforts and interoperable data standards. And so at its core, BioGeoSCAPES is really interdisciplinary by definition, as suggested by this schematic over here. Let's see if I can move this. Oops, did I go too far? So why are we motivated to do this? I mean, I think this motivation is very central to a lot of our community and audience here. We want to constrain biological and chemical effects on our changing planet, connecting from intracellular processes to organisms and assemblages to ecosystem scale cycling and feedbacks. And we want to try and connect how microbial food webs shape biogeochemical cycles and how they'll respond to changes. So to provide this community update, in the past few years, these are some of our activities, but I want to point out that this has been a long-term activity. It goes all the way back to even a 2010 OCB workshop in LA, where people were starting to think about these ideas. And so the community has been building this for quite a long time. In the past few years, we've had some acceleration on this. We received an AccelNet, which is an acceleration of networks grant to try and build support for the development. And that led to the rollout of our website and the hiring of a project coordinator, Leslie Wallace Auerbach. We've assembled a project team with international representatives. And then just more recently, we have an international implementation committee that we organized. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. And some of the aspects that have happened in recent years are an international science planning meeting in 2023, and then an implementation meeting in 2025. And then there have been 2 cohorts of BioGeoSCAPES early career fellows, and that's been a really wonderful program led by Naomi Levine and Ben Twining and Leslie, and it's been fabulous. We have a lot more demand than we can satisfy, but it's been really a great way to sort of foster networks internationally at the early career stage. That will hopefully be a good investment going forward. There's been a number of intercalibration efforts. One of the things we're trying to encourage is intercalibration efforts in the omics domain in particular, and also the rates domain. It's very much inspired by GeoTraces and the amazing example that program put forward for intercalibrating trace elements and isotopes. So there's a number of intercalibrations that have happened and more that are underway, and more are always welcome and needed. So if people want to step forward and be heroes to do that, we really encourage that, and we would be happy to help however we can. There's been a recent modeling webinar and that just happened, and a workshop planned for this September. And one of the aspects I really want to update people on today is the science plan and where it stands right now. So there's been a lot of momentum in recent years. Currently, there's about 25 ambassadors from various nations. And then there have been national activities and workshops in most of those nations, or even more of those nations. And then just traffic we can observe on our website, we have over 60 countries that have been examining our website. So this is really an exciting international effort, with the idea being that the oceans are just too big for any one nation to really study its microbial biogeochemistry alone, and we need to work together to try and generate new understanding. And this is very much an ongoing and open process, so we are encouraging more nations to get involved. So there's some documentation that's really useful on this. There are a bunch of national workshop reports that have been put together and released, and those are available on our website. The US has a nice, pretty lengthy report that is substantive, and so I recommend that if you're interested. And I think many of the people here also participate in that workshop, so thank you to that community. Some of the questions we've been asking nations are, how would your nation best contribute to BioGeoSCAPES efforts in terms of field work, laboratory work, modeling, and intercalibration, and so on? And also, what kind of science questions are most important to your nation within the broad scope of BioGeoSCAPES on a decadal time scale? The idea being that that's a time scale that's manageable for this program. Some of our recent activities have also been to participate in contributing an omics module to the COESing program, which is the Coastal Ocean Environment Summer School in Nigeria and Ghana. And that's been a really exciting school to get involved in, not only for the educational aspects of it, but also to generate contacts and potential collaborators and generate interest in BioGeoSCAPES and try and bring more nations from West Africa into our community. There's also been workshops for the early career fellows. Here's a photo of the 2024 fellows meeting that happened in the Santa Fe Institute, and they've been working together to find some collaborative efforts. They recently authored a paper together, a review paper or perspectives paper. And here's a picture of the 2025 cohort meeting in Santa Monica this past year as well. And there's hopes to recruit a third fellow in the future as well. A third cohort of fellows, sorry. And we also had a implementation meeting, as I mentioned earlier this year. So this is a committee of about 20 people from nations all around the world. And we met at MIT in Boston in cold and dark February to try and make some decisions about the implementation strategy. And that's co-chaired by Maite Maldonado from Canada and myself. And then, as I mentioned, there's also been a modeling series, a webinar series that just completed that was really excellent, and those recordings are available. And we had a lot of nations participating in registering and watching that as shown here. So a lot of great interest. So in terms of the science plan, we had an international science planning workshop in 2023 with 72 in-person participants and 90 virtual participants. And that was a really great workshop. And it led to, at the very end of the workshop, it led to this schematic that was drawn with the idea that we could coalesce around the concept of states, rates, and fates. And then we went to our artists and had it drawn up in a more sort of pretty form here. But that's sort of become the core of the science plan idea. And so that process of science plan writing has been what we've been working on for the past year or so. We had over 40 volunteer authors from that workshop representing early, mid, and advanced career stages from 10 nations. And they separated into these 3 themes, and with co-leads for the chapters. Those 3 chapters are basically in close to near finished draft form. And basically behind the idea of those chapters is that the states are, would be mapping key metabolisms over space and time to generate 4D maps of abundances of key microbes and microbial biogeochemical processes and their drivers. Likewise, the rates is connecting mechanisms of microbial metabolisms and productivity to biogeochemical cycles to build a conceptual framework for the links between microbial ecology and biogeochemical cycles. And finally, let's see. Finally, fates would be helping to predict interactions with environmental factors to provide risk and vulnerability assessments for key ocean metabolisms on our changing planet. So that's sort of the core of the idea of these chapters. And they're quite lengthy, and we've had a lot of great author input. Here are sort of the outlines for those 3 theme chapters. When we realized in certain parts we were missing expertise, we would go out and try and find some experts to, who had engaged in BioGeoSCAPES previously and try to help fill in some gaps. But as you can see, like in the states chapter, we have a chemical environment section and a biological organismal environment section, and then connecting that to trait-based knowledge as well. And then we have the rates and the fates chapters as well that include trying to connect them to, biogeochemically important enzymatic rate processes and connecting to modeling and things like that. And so those 3 theme chapters have been moving along. Then this winter, well, I guess about a year ago, we assembled the implementation committee and have been meeting and then got together in person to have an extended week-long meeting. And so that led to this current draft form of what the implementation would look like. And the idea is that one would consider how, if their study would contribute to the BioGeoSCAPES missions and deliverables, articulating the scientific goal or question. And then that could be in terms of experimental or observations, in terms of its conceptual framework, and then the setting that might occur would be in the laboratory or field, or maybe it's a digital study, modeling, or informatics based. And with the recognition that we have a lot of omics contingents, that is a very significant informatics component. And then for the field components, studies would hopefully combine omics, rates, or biogeochemistry, and the idea being that if they got 2 of those categories, that would be a contributing study, and if they can rise to doing all 3 categories, that would be a flagship study. And BioGeoSCAPES would be ready to try and help people, learn or adopt or find collaborators to achieve these goals and achieve these interdisciplinary goals. And we also recognize that a lot of studies that are ongoing now are fall in line with these with this framework, basically. And I think that's a really exciting thing. I think people are wanting to do this interdisciplinary science already, and so they're designing studies or finding collaborators to do this already. So I think we generated a table at the conference, at the implementation meeting, of cruises we know that may be within this vein, and came up with a long list already. And I think the idea is then to try and integrate that, especially with intercalibration and data standards and things like that, so we can start making interoperable data. So just to finish up, our upcoming activities include this modeling workshop in September. There's an application deadline of June 30th, and that's going to be a smaller meeting intended for modelers to come together and try and focus on how BioGeoSCAPES and modeling could be synergistic. We also are aiming to finish the science plan this summer, the full draft of it, hopefully in June, and then start internal and external review, and that will include reaching out to the participants of prior workshops and also reaching out to program managers and also to the SCORE committee as well for external review. We also have future workshops planned in coming years on standardization and intercalibration and informatics and data management. And then we are hoping to have a town hall in Scotland, in Glasgow, in 2026, as well as perhaps a scientific section if those are approved. The town hall is hopefully when we'll aim to, roll out this science plan after this internal and external review. And then I want to end just sort of touching on the implications for the OCB community, especially in light of recent events. I was really touched by Heather's introduction yesterday about the challenges that our community faces and how important community is and how important it is to keep going, and the sort of empathy that she expressed. And I think that a lot of us are facing a lot of uncertainty here in the U.S. I think for BioGeoSCAPES, it is so international, and we have a really distributed leadership network right now. So I think BioGeoSCAPES, whatever happens in the U.S., will be able to keep the momentum going. But I think it's also an opportunity to reflect on how how we can be nimble in the U.S. and still do our BioGeoSCAPES like science, or still keep this program going. And I think the science plan, not the science plan, so the U.S. national report that we wrote had a section about how the mode of science for BioGeoSCAPES in the U.S. could be within a franchise model, and that's basically how a lot of other nations have done their science within programs like GeoTraces. They had to join teams and write grant proposals, and it was a little bit more bottom up. And I think that is something that we've already had been envisioning for BioGeoSCAPES in the U.S. and would be consistent with potential changes that may be coming down the line, at least in the next few years. So with that, I'm happy to take a few questions, I think, if there's time.
Okay, well, thank you everybody so much. And thank you, Mac, for that really awesome update summarizing where we are. There's so many moving parts, but it has been such a productive experience over the last couple of years of the ExcelNet. And so we're really excited about the level of international engagement and interest, and it's really rewarding. So
we're turning to a community update from Abhishek Chatterjee.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Heather. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I know it's kind of pretty late on the East Coast and almost the end of the day, long day for all of you. Heather, who's one of the participants in this community plan that we are putting together, had originally intended for us to give this update on Friday, but then because of my travel schedule, we couldn't squeeze it on Friday, so I had to move to giving this update today. So what I'm going to talk about here is the third decadal US carbon cycle science plan, which is under preparation. And I'll go through just a few slides and giving an update on why we need this plan and what the background or the context for this plan is, what its scope is, and then where we are. We are very much in the middle of writing this plan. So this is a great time if you all, as you look through the rest of the presentation, have questions, and if you all have any inputs that you would like to provide to this plan, then this is a great time to do so. One thing you will note is that there is a QR code at the top of each slide. And so via the QR code, you can go in and sort of like we have a set of questions and a form where you can provide your inputs. I'll also have email IDs and everything at the end of the slide. So feel free to email us. Okay, so what I'm going to cover briefly is just an introduction to the overall carbon cycle science program, the history of the US carbon cycle science plans, then the scope and content of the third decadal one that we are working on right now, and then hopefully have like a Q&A and open discussion with you all. So this plan is being led by, so we have a lead author team and then we have a full author team. So the lead author team right now comprises of 4 of us covering different components of the carbon cycle science, as you will see all the way from ocean, land, geological to like the inland coastal perspective. And I'm sure many of you would actually know Leticia as well as Maria very well within the community. We also have a couple of agency coordinators, Kathy Tedesco at NOAA and Laura Lorenzoni at NASA, again, both from the ocean community. And we have had discussions with other agencies as well, although I will say right now that's all a little bit turbulent, as you all might gather. We also used to have like a coordinator, so someone who facilitates all the different meetings and coordinates all of the different writing teams and everything. The person who was working on this, she unfortunately transitioned to a different opportunity. And so right now we are looking for a new coordinator to come in place. But now sort of the main writing for this plan actually will happen through what we call as the full author team. And we have an excellent set of 20 authors, and I'll have the names come up in the next slide. But the entire selection process for this author team was actually based on community input. It's a very interdisciplinary team that looks at different institutional affiliations, diversity, geographic base, career stage, etc. And it was selected through this entire community input, which was originally solicited in all the way back actually 2022. And then sort of shortlisted based on expertise and keeping in mind like that we want representation across all the different domains, etc. So overall, the author team that we have, this is like the full author list here that we have here. You will see that it's kind of pretty much balanced across different agencies and expertise. And I have highlighted in bold folks who are focused more on the ocean side of things. And so as we again go to the slides, if something pops up in your mind in terms of like inputs or thoughts you would want to share, then you feel free to reach out to any of these people who are highlighted in bold. Some of you might be working very closely with some of them. So, okay, so why the plan and where does this fall in the context of the US Carbon Cycle Science Program? So the US Carbon Cycle Science Program is a community-focused program. It actually falls or interacts very closely with the Carbon Cycle Science Interagency Working Group, which is run by the US Global Change Research Program. Again, right now there is some turbulence in terms of how all of that relationship will work out. But the US Carbon Cycle Science Program by itself, it's a standalone community-focused program that's centered at the university at UCAR. And under the US Carbon Cycle Science Program, we then have these two big components, the NSCP, which is more focused on the terrestrial and the atmosphere side of things, and then the Ocean Carbon and Biogeochemistry, OCB, which is where we all are. And pretty much there's like a lot of linkages and a lot of going back and forth between all of this. So all these different programs kind of work very closely with each other. The third decadal US Carbon Cycle Science Plan actually falls under this US Carbon Cycle Science Program. And the reason this is the third is because there were two previous ones that have been put together before. So the first one came out all the way back in 1999, which was led by Jorge Sarmiento and Steve Bofsey. And that plan in itself, like it proposes the very large scale fundamental carbon cycle science questions that the community wanted to address. But it also led to the development of NSCP and OCB in a way. The second US Carbon Cycle Science Plan was written about like 12 years later, or came out in 2011. And that was a little bit more comprehensive, where it focused on science questions related to like related to diagnosis, attribution, prediction, but then also broke things up into like different science plan goals and science plan elements, etc. And the value of these plans have been that beyond the formulation of NSCP OCB has been that it actually drove a lot of the research agenda across different federal agencies. Again, it's like over a 6-7 year period after the plans are written, the plan or some of the questions that are identified in the plan, those go a long way in sort of guiding some of the different solicitations or calls or proposal calls, et cetera, that come out from the different federal agencies. And that is where sort of putting together a new plan, keeping in mind how the entire carbon cycle landscape as a whole and as a community, how we have changed and evolved over the last couple of decades, putting together a new plan and outlining what the big priorities for the next decade, so 2026 to 2035, what the big priorities and big science questions are, that is like really, really critical. So just a quick timeline, and I mentioned some of these already, but just a quick timeline is that this plan was initiated in 2023 by the US Carbon Cycle Science Program. Lead author and the full author group got selected over 2023-24. And right now, as I said, we are pretty much in the middle of writing all the different chapters and crafting the plan. We are hoping that we would have like a second order draft almost going into fall of this year. And then at AGU, we have town halls that will happen at AGU, as well as AMS and a couple of other big conferences. And by then, we are hoping that we can release a draft of the plan to the entire community, so everyone gets an opportunity to sort of review it and provide feedback. And then hoping to release the plan sometime by early next year. So what's the overall scope and content in the plan? So the overarching goal and target audience, as I mentioned earlier, it's primarily identifying needs and direction as identified by the scientific community for different federal agencies, private, nonprofit, and public sectors over the next decade. And I will point out that sort of this nonprofit and public sectors, as well as the private sectors, I was just listening to some of the discussions you all were having earlier. This is something sort of new. This is sort of like a new thing that we are trying to fold in, and we're trying to identify and target in this plan relative to the previous two plans, where a lot of the focus was more on the federal agencies. We have the different chapters that we have in the plan that the entire writing team is working on. It covers certain elements, for example, like providing like what the importance of the carbon cycle sciences, context and background, the progress that we have made since the previous plan. But then again, as I said, a focus on emerging private and nonprofit sector initiatives. Then really the meat of the plan and sort of like what our current state of knowledge is and sort of like what the big remaining questions are comes in this chapter that talks about the vulnerable and dynamic state of the carbon cycle. And that would encompass everything about like the carbon cycle, how it falls within the Earth system, looking at Earth system tipping points, like the carbon climate feedbacks, etc. Another new addition or recent addition, I would say, in the plan is talking a lot about different carbon management and removal techniques. And so this is like, again, a big focus here, given all the proliferation of different CDR techniques, as like both on the terrestrial side, as well as on the ocean side, as well as different types of monitoring, reporting, and verification techniques. So there is going to be like quite a bit, an entire chapter that's kind of dedicated around it. And then finally, the plan will conclude with how to implement like these different priorities, how to sort of like even sort of do a prioritization of all the different activities that we identify as most important, and then allotment of resources for the plan. Each chapter that we have in the plan, those kind of maps onto one or more of the 5 pillars, and I'll talk about that in a second here. But also want to mention that since 2011, when the second Carbon Cycle Science Plan was released, and now there have been a range of reports, assessment reports, synthesis, etc., that have been released, including the OCB Science Plan. And so we certainly, if I go back to the author list and you see the names again, we certainly have like representation from all this different, or like representation from the community who have been involved in this different plans. So we are trying to make sure that we do keep this on the back of our mind as we are crafting this plan. One thing that I would like to stress again and again is that this is a community-driven report. So hence, this is kind of coming, or the plan is coming from the scientific community and putting forward like what the big needs and the big priorities are for the next decade. So this is sort of like a snapshot of the 5 pillars that we were talking about. And we have kind of identified these pillars to make sure that they are sort of present within each chapter. like one or more of these pillars are kind of formed into each chapter. And so this covers everything from advancing science and technology, which has, for example, sustaining and expanding observations, AI ML applications, integration of models and observations, etc., to like collaboration and cooperation across different disciplines, across different sectors like public, private, and nonprofit. What are the different funding mechanisms, and how do we integrate program priorities across different agencies? Decision support needs, as well as like sort of this pillar again, which I am kind of most excited about, is like engaging the nation and making sure that we can communicate and disseminate the need for this plan, as well as like the carbon cycle science priorities across the community, and also like making sure that we train the next generation. So where are we now? As I mentioned, the author team, we are all sort of working and writing and drafting different chapters, figures, etc. There is a full author meeting that's going to happen next month in Boulder, Colorado. We already have had a virtual half-day full author meeting, and then we also had a couple of different town halls that I was looking at like the participants on the call, and I know several of you were there in the room when we had the AGU town hall. We keep on having monthly telecons for each chapter team to get together and sort of make sure that each of the chapters are on track. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that we are searching for a coordinator. This is ongoing, and hopefully we'll have a coordinator on board soon. This is a very critical role, I would say, aside from like the roles, responsibilities of the lead author and the full author team. The role of the coordinator is actually really, really huge when you're trying to shepherd 25 different people to kind of work on a plan together. And I wanted to give a huge shout out to our previous coordinator, Rebecca Stein, who did an amazing job over the last 10, 12 months that she was on the plan, or that she worked on the plan. So with that, I'll kind of stop talking and happy to take any questions if there are, and then there are a couple of other slides that I have. But if there are no immediate questions, then maybe I can just cover those couple of slides now. Okay, hearing
I'll
none.
ask Abhishek, is
Sure.
Galen, sorry, how
Hi,
is
Galen.
the current federal landscape changing things for this, or is it proceeding as expected?
It is proceeding as expected. Again, thankfully, because it's a community plan. One, it's a community plan, so we are not going on the Federal Register or anything. Second, because it's falling under the U.S. Carbon Cycle Science Program, which is housed at the at UCAR, and so we have been continuous discussions with the UCAR CPES director, Han, who has been very, very supportive of this entire endeavor. And honestly, like when a lot of the recent changes were happening at the administration level, we had a very open discussion with the entire author team. And kudos to the author team. Everyone was like really charged up and kind of ready to go ahead and like sort of work on the plan. And that way we have been forging ahead. It honestly has been I would say for me personally, it has been actually a great release valve to kind of work on this and not worry about everything else that's kind of going on. Any other questions before I just
Raised. Shoily,
I have a question. Hi, Abhishek. Thanks very much for your summary. I was wondering how, when I'm looking at your figure, your cross section of this, yes. Now I'm noticing that there's mass flow or fluid flow when you're transferring to the coastal ocean only in one direction. And I'm wondering how you're dealing with, or whether you plan to deal with submarine groundwater discharge, or the movement of water and the modification of constituents when you have this exchange of submarine groundwater discharge, where you not only have, freshwater inputs into the ocean, but you also have these recirculation cells, and just this difference in water rock ratios are significantly going to modify these parameters of alkalinity or organic carbon fluxes that, you know, are going to change quite seasonally. So I was wondering how or whether you all were planning on incorporating that important parameter into your overall model.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of, maybe let me clarify one thing and then respond to you. So in terms of the plan here, what we are trying to identify are like sort of the big open questions and the priorities, right? And in like, we are not necessarily doing an assessment. I mean, this figure, I should have clarified, like this figure that I put in here, this is something we just pulled up from Soccer 2 in order to just show like how the carbon cycle is linked across all the different domains. And that's kind of like what we are trying to focus on in this plan, like it's the entire domain. I don't think specifically we have necessarily discussed in much detail the issue that you are raising. So if you would like to either send me an email or you kind of want to go into this QR code and then just like note down
I
as
did.
this as okay, perfect, great. Yeah, as a priority topic. Then
I
yes,
think it's a
we'll certainly-
priority topic. The fluid
Okay.
flow of SGD is, you know, an order of magnitude higher than from rivers. So I think we can't keep ignoring
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yishen?
Thank you, Heather. And hi, Abhishek. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe you'll actually cover some of my question in this ongoing slide, but I'm just curious, since the town hall at AGU and AMS, what additional findings or angles have you received in these community engagements that you want to include in the plan in the 6 months that has come since then?
Yeah, that's a great question, Yushin. Thank you. And which reminds me, I don't think I actually took out that slide. We used to have another one slide, which is like things that we have, things that were raised at AGU AMS. And so I think like one of the big, I mean, AGU Town Hall was great, right? I mean, we received so many different inputs on so many different topics, everything from like before we went into AGU. So one example I would give is like, we were really uncertain of where like methane would fall in this carbon cycle science plan. We knew it's critical, it's important, but like, if you want to dig deep into it, like methane in a way, then that should really be its kind of its own plan in a way. But I think at the AGU town hall, some of the big topics that were raised in terms of like the lateral flows and methane and making sure we talk about the nitrogen and carbon cycle coupling. So those are now included and sort of like part of the chapters in a way, like either there'll be like specific boxes that call out some of those issues, or there are like dedicated sections to it. The second big feedback I think that we got from AGU AMS was in terms of engagement with like the private and the nonprofit sector and like all of the different work that's happening. There are a lot of different initiatives that kind of have been happening in those, like between philanthropies and foundations and other places. And that is like an ongoing task where we are periodically talking to some of those philanthropies and gathering like inputs from them and sort of what their activities are, what their plans are, and just making sure that that's kind of reflected in sort of the programmatic needs or priorities going forward. So one example would be like, we have had discussions with like Spark Climate Solutions, where some of our colleagues have moved to, and like talking to Spark, as well as like I've had discussions with Schmidt Sciences. And Schmidt Sciences, as you all know, I mean, they have pretty large investments on the carbon cycle RAM right now. And so kind of making sure that we are gathering inputs or feedback from those communities as well. One of the things that we do have in mind, and this again came out from the AGU and AMS town hall, was that ideally, if possible, we would like to have a pretty large what we would call like a stakeholder engagement or like 1-day workshop where we sort of talk to not just the federal agencies, but all these different sectors and different groups and communities. This is on the back of our mind. Unfortunately, we have ran into some bottlenecks in terms of getting the amount of funding we were expecting from the different agencies. So as I mentioned, like we have very strong support from NASA, NOAA, but then with some of the other agencies, that has been a little bit turbulent and challenging. And so if you're able to work past like some of those funding issues, then we would certainly want to like kind of have the stakeholder workshop where we would invite all these different representatives to come in and provide their feedback. So those are, I would say, like some of the immediate things that I can think of. There are a couple of other ones, but I'm just blanking on them now.
Thank you. My question was actually what happened since AGU, but sounds like it's a continuation.
It is, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I know you were at the AGU town hall as well as also at the AMS town hall. So since then, yeah, I mean, I think it's been mostly on the writing and just making sure we kind of keep in mind all the feedback, really, really great feedback that we received at those town halls.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just like following on your question, again, these are some of the questions that were discussed at AGU and AMS. So I'm sort of like putting them up here. Again, for any of you, I mean, all of you who are really experts on the ocean domain and you're sort of working on different topics, we already, I think I saw Heather is there in this meeting, as well as I think I saw John there. But yeah, so if there are specific topics or priorities that you feel should absolutely be covered in the plan and is sort of something that's really important over the next decade for us to understand, then please go ahead, like look into the QR code and then just like add your comments there. Or just feel free to like email. Again, you can reach just the lead authors, you can reach the full author team, you can email us individually, however you want. Like, please share your inputs, thoughts, and feedback. This is, as I said, this is a community plan, and so we want to make sure that we have your inputs, and that's the way that this plan would be a success.
Thank you, Abhishek. That's really, really helpful. We're going to get an update on GLIMR, the much anticipated satellite mission, and we have Joe Salisbury here with us. And he's going to give that update, and then I'll give a few intro remarks and a couple of quick announcements as well, as soon as Joe is done. So Joe, take it away.
Okay. Thanks a lot. My name is Joe Salisbury. I am sorry I'm not at the, I guess no one's at the meeting, but it is a shame that we couldn't be meeting in person. And ironically, I just got back from Ames, where we're supposed to be having the meeting. So I'm the principal investigator of the Geostationary Littoral Imaging and Monitoring Radiometer mission, and that is NASA's 5th Earth Venture instrument, and which will spin up into a mission someday, and I'll talk about that. And so GLIMR, let me flip through this, and I'll explain a little bit more about exactly what GLIMR is. So last year, we were honored to have a session here that talked about fast processes in the surface ocean, and my collaborators for that session were as follows. The session went extremely well. It spawned some work that went on after to try and get a manuscript or two in, perhaps someday a scoping study to continue our work on fast processes in the surface ocean. So I wanted to refer to that, and I also want to talk about GLIMR now. So GLIMR will be NASA's newest ocean color satellite. You've all heard about PACE. PACE is a real groundbreaker in terms of its hyperspectral capabilities and its high signal to noise and a suite of other instruments that they carry on board that will help get the top-notch atmospheric corrections, understand the atmosphere a little bit better, and on and on. And it was a big NASA effort, and we're tremendously excited about the work coming out of it. So after PACE now is GLIMR. GLIMR is a little bit different in that it is in a geostationary orbit. And so whereas PACE and all the other US sponsored and European sponsored ocean color sensors orbit the poles and get at best one picture a day of the Earth's surface, we can get the movie. So in other words, we are up above the equator staring down at the western northern hemisphere, mostly in the entire western hemisphere really, but we focus on the northern part. And we have very high spectral resolution, just like PACE does, so very similar to PACE. We have good spatial resolution. It will be about 500 meters at nadir. We have very good performance. I'll talk a little bit about that later in my last slide. And then what sets us apart is that we have high temporal coverage so that we can get hourly scans of anywhere that our sensor can see. We can even get higher frequency than that if necessary. Our focus is on the Gulf of Mexico, now the Gulf of America. It's still hard for me to get my head around that. And then down in this bottom box here, it says adaptive scheduling and targeting. We're super excited about this capability that we propose to come off mission and just stare at an interesting oceanographic process of high scientific or societal interest. So this may be the first and last time in the history of ocean color remote sensing that there is a public sensor that can do such a thing. So we're excited about doing some like science experiments or tracking, harmful algal blooms or oil spills or whatever. Okay, so last year, I showed this cartoon and we talked quite a bit about it. This is a cartoon of several of the processes that we intend to study. Okay, so we have a couple of science foci, and one is phytoplankton growth and physiology. Again, our topic was fast process. We feel that there are a whole suite of fast processes out there in the surface ocean that these polar orbiting satellites just do not do a good job of sampling. So if something like a phytoplankton bloom, starts and evolves and decays in the course of a week, we might have an image or maybe two images of the whole thing with a polar orbiter, but we can just stare at that, and so that we can actually understand things like fluxes and including primary productivity, perhaps, by actually observing the time-space evolution of a bloom and the carbon that it carries. So phytoplankton growth and physiology, we feel that we need a geostationary sensor to understand that better. And then, of course, short-term coastal processes, fluxes off the water, et cetera, et cetera. And we have a couple of applications foci, which I have a whole slide on in a minute. All right. Okay, and here it is right here. So we have a strong applications component, and this is in large part due to GLIMR's very unique capabilities, particularly the temporal aspects. But it also has to do with Maria Georgiou's outstanding work at the City College of New York, who is our point of contact for applications. We put very little money into the applications effort, but it has grown tremendously, where we're getting even in these last couple of weeks inquiries from businesses and from the coastal management community. And I like to tell the story. We had our first applications meeting. It was virtual. During COVID, I expected maybe 30 or 40 people to dial in, and we had 330 or 340 from every continent except for Antarctica. And so that was like an initial viewing of what the interest in this project is. Okay, so we're not $1 billion mission, so we have to focus on where we are going to image. And so you can see this map right here on the right. We really focus on the coast of North America. We're also quite interested in the rivers of South America, and we have and so we want to focus on South America too. And so this is what we're targeting right now for our observations. Up to 6 times a day in some areas. But we are flexible. And for example, there was some interest in Mexico from one of the participants at a meeting. And, we determined that we did have time to look at more of Mexico there. So this ConOps plan is evolving, and we want to optimize it for scientific and societal value. Okay, so real quickly, this is a day in the life of what we're going to look at here. The sun's coming up. You can see we're sitting over the Galapagos Islands, looking at all these places. We do the Gulf of Mexico or America several times during the day, and the coast. So it's a preliminary ConOps plan that was made a year and a half ago. But in the afternoon, here comes the night. We start to look at the South Pacific because it's very clear waters down there that we're interested in. Okay, a list of the typical ocean color products. And we are borrowing a lot of knowledge from PACE on how to do this. But I will say there's totally unique products, like new ways of looking at community productivity, primary productivity, surface ocean currents, etc., that we can only do from a geo orbit. So that's all I have, Heather, and I hope I didn't go over too much.
Just right, Joe. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.